Hey everybody, thanks for watching. I titled this video, The Ignorance of the Black Muslim. Now, if anybody is offended by that title, you need just look at the definition of ignorance. It simply means lack of knowledge, lack of education, or lack of awareness. And I believe had you been aware or had the knowledge and education about Islam before you joined, you would not have joined. So my mission is to show you something in this video that you did not know before you joined this religion. And had you known, I really believe you would not have joined the religion. Now, it's real easy for a person to just listen to some information and make up their mind and say, you know what, it sounds good, I want in. But if you don't take the time out to do the research and really look at what somebody's telling you, then how do you know if what they're saying is true? Just because it's in a book doesn't make it true. And I don't understand how so many black people can blindly follow something that is largely taken away from their only one experience on this planet without at least finding out if it's true. Now, one of the things I speak about in my videos is religion is control. Religion destroys common sense, it destroys rationale. And people will say, well, ain't nothing wrong with my common sense. Just because I'm religious doesn't mean that, I lost my common sense. But then these same people will not accept facts. They will not accept things that you can touch, that you can actually prove is real, that you can actually go and find on this planet in real life. They won't accept these things. They will rather choose a book that we can't find the existence of none of the people in the book. We can't find out who wrote the book. We can't prove the book is real. We can't prove anything about it. And the stories that the book speaks of are stories that resemble fairy tales, of stories that cannot possibly be true and have happened on this planet. But they accept these things, but won't accept facts and truth. And they will say that there's nothing wrong with their common sense. There's nothing wrong with their rationale. Now, there's so much information out here about this subject. There's so many people speaking against this whole religion thing. But the problem is nobody is listening to reason. Nobody is listening to the facts. Nobody wants to accept the proof. And it's because of ego. It's ego. People don't want to admit that they was wrong. People don't want to admit they made a mistake. People don't want to have to say that, damn, I shouldn't have done that, because of their ego. And you owe it to yourself to find out if something that I'm following, something that's going to change the way that I eat, the way that I dress, the way that I treat my girl, the way that I raise my kids, the way that I look at the world, the way that I look at other people. You owe it to yourself to find out if something that's going to change something so important in your life is true or not. You owe it to yourself to find out if it's real, because if you don't, who are you hurting with your ego? You're only hurting yourself. Okay, I'm not going to sit here and preach too much. I want to get into straight information. And we have to, as black people, we have to stop following these religions that have destroyed our people. We got to stop blindly following people who are not us. And that's the fact. We got to look at our past and look at what was going on before we were prisoners of war or slaves. We got to look at what our people was doing, because when you start doing the research, you see everybody stole from us. Everybody copied from Africa. They copied from Kemet, Egypt. And they created a system that's basically designed to keep us entrapped and keep us blind from who we were, because for some reason they are scared of us returning back to who we were. Now, most black Muslims don't realize that the Arabs were the first slave traders. They were the first ones to basically put black people in bondage and make money off of our slave labor. Now, I want you to listen to an Arab tell you about what was going on during that time. Now,
I must admit that I too, among hundreds of millions of educated people, was under the impression that the African slave trade was the sole responsibility of the Christian Europeans, the white race. That is, until I started exploring the subject in greater depth, and especially after reading an incredibly enlightening book called The Legacy of Arab Islam in Africa by John Alambila Azuma. My whole perspective and understanding has changed dramatically, and I would like you to tell us more about this subject.
The success of Muhammadan Islam in deceiving, misinforming, deforming, and contorting both history and reality over a period of almost 1400 years has been astounding. That is, until now. The greatest tragedy about this particular subject is that most of the descendants of African slavery, the black people in the Americas, around the world, as well as among the African blacks are totally ignorant of the actual facts. Before we lose the concentration of our listeners, I would like to make the following statement and then prove it. That the worst, most inhumane and most diabolical institution of the black African slave trade was initiated, refined, perpetrated and implemented by the Mohammedan Arabs and later aided and abetted by the black converts to Mohammedan Islam. I predict that, as usual, the two subcultures, those of denial of facts and of political correctness, will attack us without once disproving a single statement and or conclusion that we make. Slavery was not created by the white races, because it has existed throughout human history and practiced by every tribe, culture, civilization, racial group and religion. In fact, the very word slavery has its root in the name Slav, based upon the Slavic peoples of Europe who were subjugated by other Europeans. It is not common knowledge that the Arabic word abd is synonymous with the meaning of slave. For example, Abdullah means literally the slave of Allah, and that in the language of the Arabs, all black peoples are called abid, plural, for slaves. While much has been written concerning the transatlantic slave trade, surprisingly little attention has been paid to the Islamic slave trade across the Sahara, the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. While the European involvement in the African transatlantic slave trade to the Americas lasted for just over 3 centuries, the Arab involvement in the African slave trade has lasted 14 centuries, and in some parts of the Mohammedan world is still continuing to this day. The birth of Mohammedan Islam and its conquests brought about the birth of institutionalized, systematized, and religiously sanctioned slave trade on a massive and global scale. In fact, the Quran allows the taking of slaves as booty or reward for wars of aggression against any and all unbelievers, most of the human population. This has led to an enormous number of so-called holy wars, jihad in Arabic. There was and is absolutely nothing holy about these wars, which are primarily to plunder, slaughter, rape, subjugate and rob other human beings of their wealth, produce, freedom and dignity. Mohammedan Muslim states and tribes attacked other non-Muslim groups to achieve these objectives. Although Islamic jurisprudence laid down regulations for the treatment of slaves, however, incredible and heinous abuses have occurred throughout the history of Mohammedan Islam. By the Middle Ages, the Arabic word abd was in general used to denote a black slave, while the word mamluk referred to a white slave. Ibn Khaldun, 1332 to 1406, the preeminent Islamic medieval historian and social thinker, wrote, "The Negro nations are as a rule submissive to slavery, because they have attributes that are quite similar to dumb animals." It should also be noted that black slaves were castrated based on the assumption that the blacks had an ungovernable sexual appetite. When the Fatimid Caliphate came to power in Egypt, they slaughtered all the tens of thousands of black military slaves and raised an entirely new slave army. Some of these slaves were conscripted into the army at age 10. From Persia to Egypt to Morocco, slave armies from 30,000 to up to 250,000 became commonplace. The Islamic slave trade took place across the Sahara Desert, from the coast of the Red Sea, and from East Africa across the Indian Ocean. The Trans-Sahara trade was conducted along 6 major slave routes. Just in the 19th century, for which we have more accurate records, 1.2 million slaves were brought across the Sahara into the Middle East, as well as a further 450,000 down the Red Sea and 442,000 from the East African coastal ports. That is a total of 2 million black slaves just in the 1800s. At least 8 million more were calculated to have died before reaching the Muslim slave markets. A comparison of the Islamic slave trade to the American slave trade reveals some extremely interesting contrasts. While 2 out of every 3 slaves shipped across the Atlantic were men, the proportions were reversed in the Islamic slave trade. 2 women for every man were enslaved by the Muslims. While the mortality rate of slaves being transported across the Atlantic was as high as 10%, the percentage of slaves dying in transit in the Trans-Sahara and East African slave market was a staggering 80 to 90%. While almost all the slaves shipped across the Atlantic were for agricultural work, most of the slaves destined for the Muslim Middle East were for sexual exploitation as concubines, in harems, and for military service. While many children were born to the slaves in the Americas, the millions of their descendants are citizens in Brazil and the United States of today. Very few descendants of the slaves that ended up in the Middle East survived. While most slaves who went to the Americas could marry and have families, most of the male slaves destined for the Middle East were castrated, and most of the children born to the women were killed at birth. It is estimated that possibly as many as 11 million Africans were transported across the Atlantic, 95% of which went to South and Central America, mainly to Portuguese, Spanish, and French possessions. Only 5% of the slaves ended up in what we call the United States today. However, a minimum of 28 million Africans were enslaved in the Muslim Middle East. Since at least 80% of those captured by Muslim slave traders were calculated to have died before reaching the slave markets, it is believed that the death toll from 1400 years of Arab and Muslim slave raids into Africa could have been as high as 112 millions. When added to the number of those sold in the slave markets, the total number of African victims of the Trans-Saharan and East African slave trade could be significantly higher than 140 million people. What is obscene about this whole subject is the Muhammadan, Muslim, and Arab culture of denial regarding their complicity in the African slave trade, as well as the ignorance of black Muslims about the reality of their past and present conditions. The statistics and reports above are based upon the logbooks kept at the African slave ports, ship logs, travelers' reports, eyewitness accounts, etc. Ladies and gentlemen, the facts and reality of Muhammadan Islam's complicity in the slave trade and their inhuman depravity are infinitely more devastating.
Now, I think the video speaks for itself, and you got so many black Muslims out there today, and it's a shame because they're talking about Islam is a black religion. This is an African religion. Now, when you look at that, come on. If we are their people, how could they do such a thing to us? If this is our religion, how could they do that to us? Think about that. They were brutal. They were worse than the fucking white people. So how can you follow them? And then you got so many black people saying that, you know what, they occupy Egypt, they occupy the pyramids, so this is somehow giving validity to this being a African religion. Because some of the Arabs will say, you know what, this is the African civilization, we came and conquered it. Some of the tour guides will tell you that. They'll tell you the truth because you can't hide it when you get there. You'll see so much black faces all over the hieroglyphics on the wall. But you got to ask yourself this. If it was their civilization, if their people did in fact build the pyramids, what kind of people would dig up their dead and put them on display? Would you dig up, would they dig up George Washington, dig up his body, put his fucking sarcophagus out there for people to make money on? Would they do that? No. So what kind of people would dig up their own ancestors from the greatest civilization ever on this planet and put them on display? What kind of people would deface the greatest monument on this planet, which is the pyramids, because they defaced it. The pyramids were smooth on each side. They chiseled off all of the limestone. There wasn't steps like you see today. It was a smooth, flat surface. And they chiseled off the limestone to build their mosques and build their temples. What kind of people would do that to the greatest monuments on the planet if it was their own? It's not theirs, it's ours. It's African. It's not theirs at all. Now, you have to really realize that slavery didn't stop with the Arabs. They're still going slavery today. And people are saying that Islam is true because it's on the rise. It's the fastest growing religion on the planet. So many people are converting to Islam, and they're not realizing because they don't do no research that they are being forced, just like the Arabs were. And I'm going to show this later on, that the Arabs themselves were forced into Islam. But so many Africans are becoming Muslims today because they are being forced, and they are still enslaving black people. And here's the proof. So yeah.
the government needed to do was to lay on a couple of Antonov cargo planes, and all of these people would have been here in a few hours and in comfort rather than 3 weeks in a cattle truck.
For centuries, Sudanese Arabs have been taking the black tribal people from Sudan as slaves for their personal use, as well as exporting them to the Middle East.
It's like a cow meat in the butchery. You can see. We want to ask what is going on here.
While the peace talks are at effect in Nairobi between the Sudan government and the SPLM-SPLA, the Sudan government has launched its inhuman act today and targeted Mololkon on the 23rd of June, year 2002. As now, you are seeing an innocent life lost to the shrapnels of Antonov. Yeah, this is one of the examples we should show to the international community and those who have been talking all the time that Sudan government is genuine in its quest for peace. A peace with such acts. A peace covered with blood. The blood of the innocent who don't know what they are up for. These are the victims of the real Southern Sudanese people who are left to the mercy of NIF in Khartoum and their allies worldwide.
Local community leaders here have given estimates that would suggest that over 200,000 have been enslaved over a 20-year period.
The thought of human beings for sale moved me to taking action. As a filmmaker, I wanted to expose the atrocities and give a voice to those who have none.
The most shocking thing happened to me. A small child was slaughtered and the head severed from the body. The Arabs forced me to carry the head. For 5 days, I was forced to carry that head, even though it had started to decompose and produced a strong stench. On the 5th day, they told me to throw the head by the wayside and to set it on fire. Although I became a slave and worked night and day herding the master's cattle, I think that all the bodily pain and suffering was less heavy on my spirit than the carrying of the head of the dead child. My master was called Hassan Abdul Rahman from Lagawa. A lot of Dinka tribesmen have remained behind as slaves of the Arabs. I hope that those who brought us back to Dinka territory can also do something to bring them back to.
Today, there may be over 100,000 slaves in Sudan still in captivity, and more slaves are being captured from the Darfur genocide. Just like the genocide in Nazi Germany, many nations in the world refuse to acknowledge that slavery exists and therefore refuse to liberate them. These slaves have disappeared and remain hidden in the darkness.
Christian boys kidnapped from the villages are confined to an Islamic school where they are made to study the Arabic language and memorize the entire Quran. Rising for prayers before dawn and studying until the late hours of the night, they are indoctrinated into the strict teachings of the Islamic faith. Those who refuse to cooperate are beaten and chained until they improve their studies. Those who refuse to cooperate are beaten and chained until they improve their studies.
They must give up playing. Playing is harmful. It doesn't allow them time to study. Anyone who misbehaves, he's whipped so that he doesn't play anymore. When his colleagues see him being whipped, he will stop playing and become afraid. The Quran is difficult. If they do not work hard, they will not be able to memorize it all.
A lot of the footage that we have received from these nations, some in Sudan, show young boys being beaten, show them chained, walking down these dusty paths around the school compound with chains. In one school, they have to write on a small board that they carry with them Quranic verses and then wash this board and drink the water. And their teachers tell them that drinking this water causes them or helps them to memorize this faster. And their teachers tell them that drinking this water causes them or helps them to memorize this faster.
Young girls have also been kidnapped and sold as concubines or given over to the sexual pleasures of the Islamic soldiers. Young girls have also been kidnapped and sold as concubines or given over to the sexual pleasures of the Islamic soldiers. Girls as young as 9 have been repeatedly violated. Tens of thousands of children have disappeared, hidden away by radical Muslims seeking to create a new generation void of any Christian faith. Christian men who refuse to submit to the Islamic movement have been imprisoned, beaten, and oftentimes mutilated. Others have been hung, nailed to trees, or drowned in the River Nile.
Here's the proof. So yeah, as you can see, this is how Islam is on the rise. This is what Islam is doing to black people, to Africans, to our people. So yeah, this is an African religion if you are forced into it. This is what's going on. You know, some Muslims will look at this and say, you know what, they're just following their religion. They're just doing what their religion says is right. It's true. But the Quran also says that stars are missiles that God used to keep demons from getting into heaven. The Quran also says that the sperm is produced between the backbone and the rib. This is in the Quran. So, what? Is that true? Fuck no. Come on, man. Y'all gotta wake up. This is what they're doing to our people. This is what's going on. This is how this religion is on the rise. And this is the same tactics they were doing way back during pre-Islamic times to force people into Islam. They were forcing the Arabs into Islam, as I will show you. As you will see in this video, something about Islam you never knew, and had you known, you would not have joined. Okay, so this is where it gets good. This is where we get into the good part, where we get into all the information, because as I've said, the Arabs were themselves forced into Islam. So what were the Arabs before they became Muslim? And that's something that a lot of Muslim scholars run from. They do not like to talk about the fact that the Arabs were Christians and Jews and pagans before Islam. And that's a well-documented fact. You have to realize that Islam is a fairly new religion as far as Christianity and Judaism goes. Paganism as well. It is new. It came in on the scene during recorded history when things were really being recorded and people were taking knowledge. They were acknowledging a lot of things that was going on around the world. So it's during recorded time. So it should be very easy to prove that this religion is real. It should be very easy to prove that Muhammad actually existed. And you should be able to find out the fact that the Arabs were Jews first. They were Christians first. They were pagans first. But nobody would speak to that, because then you would have to explain what happened for them to convert. And the proof, the facts would have to show that they converted because of truth and not because of force. Okay, so we know that Judaism was around first. We know that Christianity came much later. The New Testament wasn't written until 400 years after the Old Testament. Now, the Syriac Orthodox Church of Antioch has the oldest surviving liturgy of Christianity. They have the liturgy of St. James the Apostle. Now, Syriac, of course, is the official language, both written and spoken, of that church. Now, if you look at the Bible, Acts 11:26 tells you that you'll find Christianity in Antioch. They tell you that's where it began. So where's Antioch? Antioch is in Syria, of course. But you can also find this church in Israel. You can find it in Lebanon. You can find it in Iraq. So it's in a lot of places that is today largely populated with a large Islamic presence. So what you have to find out is what happened. We can see that Christianity was there first, and we know that Judaism was before Christianity. So what happened to bring all this about? Because they would have you believe that these people just started off as Muslim. There was nothing before. And, you know, Muhammad came and the word spread, and these people was not another religion before they became Muslim. So it's making it seem like they wasn't that religion because they rejected it or because it's not true, which it's not. But they're not bringing up the fact that this was the practice of these people and that they switch religions back and forth like so many times for political purposes and, you know, just for a job sometimes. Because if you wanted to work for somebody who was Muslim and you was Christian, you had to switch, just to get a job and feed your family. And that's the type of things that was taking place back then. Okay, now, a very important figure in Christianity is Nestorius. Now, Nestorius is basically responsible for creating a huge divide in Christianity during the Roman Empire. Now, Nestorius had different beliefs than what the Roman Empire wanted him to believe in, and when they threw him out, basically a lot of followers followed him when he left the Roman Empire. Now, with so many different beliefs in Christianity, so many people believe different things about Christ and about the religion than others. Nestorius didn't believe in the dual nature of Christ. He didn't believe that Christ was both divine and human. He only believed that Christ was just a man. Now, something that you need to know is they didn't call it Christianity back then. They called it the ism of whoever you follow. So if you followed Nestorius, it was called Nestorianism. So whoever you follow was basically the ism of that person. Christianity was created in Antioch, which is why Nestorius left Antioch, because he didn't go for the whole Christ divine thing. So Nestorius left Antioch and he fled to Persia, or basically, which is today Iran and basically Afghanistan. He fled there and started his ministry over, because in 451, the Council of Chalcedon, it basically threw him out. Now, we know that at some point Nestorius went to Mesopotamia, which is basically Iraq, and he started his church there. And in Iraq, basically what was the Church of the East became the Church of Nestorius. Now, an interesting thing about the Church of the East, because when you start doing research on that, you find out a lot of things. Now, these are the nuns of the Church of the East. If you look at the way they're dressed, you see way back then, they look like the Muslim garb of today. Now, even still today, these nuns dress the same exact way, but it's showing you that way before Islam came about, that these people, these Arab people, were dressing this way, they looked this way, and this thing was going on way before Islam came into play. Okay, so what is going to happen is you're going to start to see a comparison. You're going to start to see a comparison between early Christianity and Judaism and modern day Islam. You're going to start to see a lot of the phrases and terms and names that you know from the Quran and Islam. You're going to start to find them in early Christianity, Judaism. You're going to start finding a lot of these names and terms there. And the thing is, the definition and meaning you have from Islam is going to be completely different from what they originally was in Christianity. So basically, I'm telling you that these terms that you got in Islam, these names and stuff, originated from Christian sources, Christian origins. So what they basically did was take these names and terms, repurpose them, and give them a new identity in the Quran. So this is what you're going to see. And this whole subject leads me to the Lakhmids. Now, the Lakhmids basically had a military encampment in Iraq, which is basically South Central Iraq today. Now, the Lakhmids, basically, they are responsible for occupying what is known historically as the First Arab Kingdom. And the whole thing about this is this place that they occupy is called Al-Hira. Now, that's important to note because Al-Hira is noted here as being in South Central Iraq. And it is said in the Quran that Muhammad got his visions in Hira Cave, which is in Mecca. So you don't find a Hira cave in Mecca during this time frame. The only Hira you find is the Lakhmid stronghold in South Central Iraq. Okay, so we know the Lakhmids were Christians. We know that Al-Hira was a Christian town because the Syriac Church of the East had a diocese there in the 5th and 11th century. Now, the 5th century being before Islam came into play. Now, the Quran says that Muhammad sought reclusion for oneness or closeness with Allah in the Hira caves, and he stayed there for several days waiting for a revelation. Now, as I've said, you don't find a Hira cave at that time, at the time of Muhammad, and not during the time before Muhammad. The only place you find a Hira cave is in South Central Iraq, which is far from Mecca. Now, as I've said, when you start digging into early Christianity in Iraq, you're going to find a lot of things that that relates to Islam before Islam ever existed. Now, a place I gotta know is Hadabaya. Now, if you start looking at these places and you start having trouble finding it, you just have to add an AL or take away an AL, because that's basically what they did to separate the early Christianity from Islam. So just like the Hira cave before was Al-Hira, they took away the AL and just left a Hira, and they put that in the Quran. Now Hadabaya is now Al-Hadabaya. So it's basically a book out about Baghdad during the Caliphate era. And it's talking about a river near Baghdad or near Hadabaya called the Nara Isa. And it says, the northward into Hadabaya quarter. It is especially mentioned by early writers that the waters of the Nara Isa never filled, nor was its channel liable to become silted up. They describe it as flowing in a fine stream. Now, I'm going to stop right there, because you're talking about Nara Isa. Nara Isa basically translates in Arabic to River Jesus, because Nara is river in Arabic, and of course Isa is Jesus' name in the Quran. So we got River Jesus. Now, why is this important? Because if you go to the Surah, if we go to Surah 1924, it's when Miriam is giving birth to Jesus, and she's in pain. She wants to die. And then she hears a voice from below her, and it says to her, the Lord has provided you beneath you a stream. The Lord has provided beneath you a stream. So what is it talking about? They're talking about the Nara Isa. They're talking about a place. One of the things you're going to see as we go along is most of the names that you are familiar with in the Quran corresponds to a specific place in Iraq or in the Middle East. So when you start to dig into this whole thing, you'll start to see that mostly Islam is a map. Okay, so we see that Hira, which is the cave that Muhammad had his visions in the Quran. Now we see that Hira actually corresponds to Al-Hira, which is basically a place in South Central Iraq. It's not in Mecca. We see that Isa, which is the name of Jesus, actually corresponds to Nara Isa, which is a stream or a river that is near Anbar, which is basically close to Hira or Al-Hira. Now, the Kufic script. If you look at the Hadith, which the Hadith is basically writings that take place outside of the Quran, you already know this. Now, Kufic was developed in Al-Hira. It wasn't developed in Kufa or Al-Kufa. Now, it's an Islamic site called Islamic Awareness that talks about this and is talking about this particular subject, because a lot of Christians like to bring up the fact that Kufa, the language, wasn't in Al-Kufa, but it actually developed in Al-Hira. But this gives validity to what I'm saying, that before Muhammad, before this whole visions in the cave, we had an Al-Hira. There was no other Hira before that. This is where the name comes from. So this site is basically talking about the subject, and it's saying down here, it says Kufa or Basra did not start their careers in Muslim cities until the second decade of Islam, but these cities were located closer to Anbar and Hira in Iraq, Kufa being but a few miles south of Hira. Now, it says the city of Kufa therefore inherited and took on the script which was already prevailing in Hira. The script, as we have mentioned, became later to be called as Kufic. Now, this is all important because we know Hira or Al-Hira, and we know that Kufa or Al-Kufa, these places originally were Jewish, Christian. So you got to ask yourself, why would Islam, who we know strongly hates Christianity, why would they take something that is originally developed in Christian places, has its origin, its inception in Christian Judea places, and bring it to Islam? It's something that you really got to ask yourself, and we got to start looking at these names. So you're starting to see, as I said, these names that you are familiar with Islam are starting to correspond to early Jewish Christian places. Okay, so we see that Kufic, which is the script that the Hadith was written in, comes from Al-Hira, which is a place in South Central Iraq. We see that Al-Hira is a Christian Jewish place, and that was the religion of the people during that time. We also see that Kufa is the same name as basically the Kufic script. But what about the Hadith? where does hadith come from? Now, if you go to Iraq today, you'll find a haditha. Now, some of these names are the same as I have said, but if you look at haditha in this early language, you'll see it was pronounced hadara, which is Aramaic or Syriac, and we know that Arabic comes from Syriac. But if you look at it today, if you actually Google the name hadara, you see that it says hadara or haditha, which is basically Syriac, and in Arabic is al-hadith. So we know that they got the name hadith from this place. But what you don't know about this place is it was Christian, it was Jewish. It says clearly, the city became renowned as a bishopric center of the Church of the East. That's that church that I shown you with the nun. Within the ecclesiastical province of Arabin. There existed also a substantial number of Jews, many of whom were converted to Christianity at the hands of its bishop Titus from Hadara in the 6th century. So there it is. It's basically backing up what I'm saying. It's telling you what's going on. But you would not know to look for stuff like this. Who knows to go look up this stuff? You just listen to what somebody tell you. They give you a book and they say this is this, this is that. But this is called research, what we're doing right now. When you're doing research and you look at it, you can see what's going on. But let's keep digging. Okay, so the Bible has chapters, and we know that the Quran has surahs. Now, if you look up Surah City, you'll find that Surah City is a place in Iraq, just like we've been finding everything else in Iraq. Now, you will also see that Surah City has a Surah Academy. Now, if we look at Surah Academy, we'll see Surah Academy was a Jewish yeshiva academy in Babylon, one of the two major Jewish academies along with the Medina Yeshiva Academy. Now, the person who started this whole place was a man, an Arab by the name of Abda Arika. Now, it says, when you look it up, it says he was a Jewish Talmudist who was born and lived in the Kafri Sissanet Babylonia, known as an Amora of the 3rd century, who established at Surah the systemic study of the rabbinic traditions, which using the Mishnah as text led to the compilation of the Talmud, which we know is Jewish. Now, once again, you are starting to see all of the phrases and terminology that you know about Islam is going back to Jewish Christianity. You'll find this stuff everywhere. I can go through the whole Quran and we'll see that all of the things that you are familiar with this religion goes back to Judaism, Christianity. Now, the word surah actually means beginning or start. And as you can see, these things are corresponding to pre-Islamic Judeo-Christian meanings. The word Quran itself is a Christian Judeo meaning. Quran does not mean recite like most Muslims believe it does. It means Pentateuch reader. If you take it back to its earliest language, the language that they spoke during that time, which was Syriac and Aramaic, it means Pentateuch reader. Now it says here, some say Quran means recite. Not true. The word Quran means Pentateuch reader when you go where the word originally came from, Syriac. Here it says, in Syriac, the word Quran is written Quran, meaning Pentateuch reader. Now, the Pentateuch is basically the 5 books of Moses. It is Jewish religion. Quran also means lectionary. Take it back to Aramaic, Syriac, same thing. It means lectionary. Now, here's telling you, the book being a Syro-Aramaic lectionary with hymns and biblical abstracts created for use in Christian services. Now, a lectionary is basically like the sermon that the deacon prepared for church. Now, if you go and look at the Syriac Orthodox Church in Antioch, that church I was showing you earlier, if you look at the duties of the deacons, they have 6 duties. If you look at the 4th duty, it says Korayo. It means reader. Korayo sounds like Quran to me. Reader. This is where this stuff is coming from. I don't know how much more proof I need to show you people, but I got a lot more. This is where this stuff is coming from. Now, you're going to have some Muslims say, well, we know that they believed in a lot of Christian things and that Christianity stole from Islam. Well, how is that possible when this religion came sooner? It was before. Now, I showed you before there was a split. There was a divide in the religion. Now, basically, the people who believed that Jesus was divine and human, they stayed with the Roman Catholic Church. They stayed with the Roman Empire and became Christians or Catholics later on. Everybody else went a different way. The people who went a different way, who didn't believe that Jesus was both divine and human, they are the people who are bringing about all these terms that I'm showing you. this Quran, and all these terms that now correspond to Islam. This is where this stuff come from. It came from these people who are basically Jews. So if you want to kind of put the blame on somebody, we can see from the proof I'm showing you that obviously the religion of Islam came up out of Judaism more than Christianity. Now, I want y'all to take a look at this very old footage from the 1940s. This is from the Steven Spielberg Jewish Library. Now, the video basically documents the migration of Jews from southern Saudi Arabia. They're from Yemen. Now, we all know today that Yemen is hugely Islamic, but here is more proof of me showing you. As recently as the 1940s, it was populated with a large Jewish presence that was taken over by Islam. Now, take a look at the video footage.
This primitive fanatic land is ruled by a Muslim priest king called the Imam.
Now notice he called the Imam an Islamic priest king. When have you ever heard of an Imam referred to as a priest king? Priest king. Now pay attention, look at the fez he's wearing. First, look at the beard. Notice the beard. Notice how long the beard is, just like Muslims keep their beards long. Notice his fez, his hat. Look at the hat. Where have you seen that fez before? You've seen it on Shriners. Shriners wear those same fezzes. And what is the logo on the Shriners fez? Look at it. It is the logo of Islam. The same logo. It's up there. They're trying to show you exactly where this stuff comes from, because in order for you to become a Shriner, you have to be at the highest level in Freemasonry. You have to be at 32 or 33 degree Freemasonry, and you have to be Muslim to become a Shriner. Remember, I was showing you in the video about Mike Brown and Trayvon Martin. If you look at Trayvon Martin's father, look at his picture. He is a Mason. Look at the beard, look at the hat that resembles the Shriner hat. They both resemble the hat that the Jewish man was wearing in the video. Okay, now let's get back to the video.
Even as it is written, on the wings of a brave, strange bird. Children of Yemen, hear me. As it stands written, so the day has come. Dance as King David danced when he beheld the tabernacle of the Torah. Sing our ancient songs, the songs of Solomon.
I want you to pay attention to these people. Look at these people. They are Arabs. They are Arab men and women. They come from Yemen, which is Saudi Arabia. See, people don't realize that life existed before they was born, and things was going on before you existed. You got to do research and look at history. What are all of these Jews doing in Saudi Arabia and Yemen? They were there before, way before Islam came about. Islam took over. Now, what is going on is this is the 40s. This is right after Islam was recognized as a state. So, the people who were running this whole thing are fulfilling Jewish prophecy, which is why in the video the man keeps talking about exactly like the Torah speaks of. You know, we're going to fly out of there back to the homeland on wings of gold and all this stuff like that. Listen to what he's talking about. He's talking about Jewish prophecy coming true. So for all these black so-called true Hebrew Israelites or true black Jews, if the Bible was talking about you being true Jews, the black people, where the fuck were y'all? How come we're not finding y'all down in Saudi Arabia? These are Arabs they're speaking of. These are Jews. This is all bullshit. You have people trying to bring doctrine to life, false doctrine to life. That's all that's going on. Now, pay attention. Look at the way they dress. Does they look like the same Muslim clothes that they wear today? Look at the garb. Notice. Now I want you to listen carefully. Listen to the women. Listen to that call that they do. Listen. These are Jews doing that. That's Jewish people making those sounds. We always hear those sounds and we put it towards Islam. We always put it towards Arabs, but we put it towards Islam all the time. Here it is. This is proof showing you that these people were Jews. This is what they were. So, let's keep going. Okay, so when you start doing the research, you'll see between the time of 622 and 750 AD, the Arabs went on a conquering spree. They started conquering most of the Middle East. Now, during this time, this is during recorded history. This stuff is well documented. But during the early time of their conquest, there is no mention of a Muhammad or Islam or any of that. As a matter of fact, when you start doing the research, you'll see when they're describing what's going on, you'll see that the Jews were allowed to still go and worship. The Christians were still allowed to go and worship in these places that were newly conquered by these Arabs, because of course the Arabs were Jews and they were Christians, as I've shown you. Now, it wasn't until the late 7th century, so we're talking like around 690, 692, when Abdul Malik came and he conquered the Byzantine Empire in Syria. And when he did that, that's when things really start to change. That's when you start to see the true rise of Islam. Okay, now I want to go back to an earlier video because I want to make a point, and I think the video I did before this about Islam will prove that point a lot better, and I don't feel like doing it all over again for this video. And I will be deleting that video and uploading this video when it's done to take its place, because this one has way more proof, way more facts than my previous video. But I want you to go ahead and listen to these facts or these points I brought up in this previous video about Islam, and then I will build on that when it's over. Now, this Abdul Malik, he's basically like the father of the Quran. He's like the man who kind of basically brought this thing together. Now, what he did was he had to get rid of the language that they spoke before, because, of course, as I've shown you, a lot of these names and terms point towards Christianity and away from Islam. So you have to think about this. Think about, getting rid of a language. How would you do that? Now, one of the things that Abdul Malik did was he built a lot of schools. Now, when you're taking the people out of their language, first you outlaw the original language. So you outlaw the Syriac or the Aramaic. You outlaw that language, and then you build schools. And then you teach the kids Arabic, the new language, and you pound that language into the kids. Now, a generation needs to pass before that language basically catches. Now, a generation would be about, 60 to 70 years. So you have these Persians who were conquered, and they were being ruled in Syria under the Christian Byzantine Empire, who was ruled by the Emperor Justinian II. You have Abdul Malik coming in and basically taking over the Byzantine Empire. And we know it's around 692, because in 692, these were the coins that were printed. Now, this was a Christian empire. If you look at these coins, you'll see Christ on one side and you'll see the cross on the other. Now, in 693, when Abdul Malik took over, he struck these coins. Now, look at these coins. You see where they copy from, and you see what's missing. And now you take away their language again, and you tell them don't speak this Syriac or Aramaic no more. The language of our people really is Arabic, because Muhammad, because most Muslims will say this. They'll say, oh no, the Arabic language is a sacred language and it was given to Muhammad. Of course they didn't speak it back then, because it was just given to him, and it was the language that people were supposed to speak. But now you can see why they don't want you learning this language, because a lot of these terms and names point to Christianity. So now you have Abdul Malik come in and force these people to start speaking Arabic, and you give them this new religion that represents the Arab, represents these people. See, language doesn't lie, and you see what has been going on with these religions. Now, if you want to give people this religion to worship, you have to take away the old meanings of certain words, because people want to know what they mean. So this is why language was changed so much around that area, because you can't tell a person that Muhammad is a person when Muhammad is just a phrase that means a person who is worthy of praise. So language has to be changed, and you can see why it was done, to get people to join these religions and get people not to understand what these words mean and where they come from. What's the real definition of these words? So you have whole languages that was basically just gone, wiped out. New languages was forced on people. That way the old real meaning, yeah, it still survived, but only certain people knew it. Of course, if you not in the know, if you're a young person growing up, you was taught a certain language, and that's all you know. You're not going to even fathom to look into something else because you don't know about something else unless you do some research, which is why I tell people doing research is important. Okay, so let's start putting this together. Now, we know Muhammad died 632 AD. Now, we know that the Quran didn't really start coming into play till around the 700s. So we're talking about 70 years after Muhammad died, we start getting this Quran. Now, you got to start putting the pieces together. We know the oldest Quran that we found was basically carbon dated back to around about 715 AD. Abdul Malik was born 646 AD in Mecca. He was raised in Medina. Now we know that he conquered the Byzantine Empire in Syria around 693, 92, 93. So when you start putting it together, yeah, it would make sense. Then he conquers this empire, he brings in the Quran and this new religion and teaches this religion to the people. So you just connecting the dots and you can see what's going on, what happened. Also, Muhammad, his wife Khadijah, what was she? She was a rich Roman Catholic nun. He married her when he was 25, and she was like 40. So you start putting this stuff together. Also, Allah, I was telling you before, what Allah means a lot of different things. What is the symbol of the Islam? You got the crescent moon, you have the star. Allah is a moon god who married a sun goddess, and they had 3 daughters, Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. Now this sun god, or this moon god, name was Sin, but his title was Al-Ilah, and they condensed it down to Allah. This is why before or during the appearance and ending of a crescent moon, they have Ramadan. Now pagans also worship the moon. Now if you do any research into Catholicism, you'll notice that it's a lot of paganism inside of that religion, and they have a lot of rituals in Catholicism just like the Muslims do. They both use the rosary beads, they both pray with beads. They both have a lot of ritualistic sayings and chants that they have to do when they're praying, and it's a lot of things that they do that are similar. Now, where do we find this whole worship of the moon and sun together? You see it a lot in Catholicism. You see when the Pope holds up that circle wafer, it's a symbolic symbol of the sun. Now he puts it into this holder that looks like the sun, but if you look inside of that, you can see like a crescent moon. Also, what they basically did with Islam was switch around, because some people would say that, well, the sun should be a man and the moon a woman. Isis was represented as a moon goddess, and Hathor always had like the crescent moon with the sun over top of her head. When you look at the Egyptian hieroglyphics, you can see that. So what Islam basically did was switch it around. So you had Isis, who was basically like a moon goddess, and then you had Osiris, which was like a sun god, or Ra, or Horus, which was sun gods. They just switched it around. So long before Islam, long before Christianity, there was a worship of Allah. Now Allah, like I said before, they worshiped them in many different names. One of the names was Baal Hadad. You've heard the Bible mention Baal a lot of times, Baal Hadad. When you look at the symbol for Baal Hadad, you'll always see the crescent moon and the sun. You always see the crescent moon with the circle symbol that represents the sun. Now, what were the Babylonians? They worshipped Nimrod. Nimrod was a pagan. So you can tie all of this together. You understand that Babylon was in where? Modern day Iraq. So the Islamic connection is all in this same area. The Assyrians were pagans before they were Muslim. They worshipped paganism. They worshipped Baal Hadad, who is the moon and the sun. You just got to do some research. You can start putting all this stuff together. When you look at the old hieroglyphs written in stone, they wrote this stuff in stone, people. hundreds of years ago. Why did they put it in stone? Now, when you start doing research and looking at this stuff, you can see where it all came from. It all ties in together. So basically, Christianity, whoever created that, they also created Islam. They created to control the Arabs, to control these people who basically occupied the majority of the Middle East. If you go over there to the Middle East, you'll notice a lot of the major mosques. Right next to it is a Catholic church. I mean, you find them everywhere. So you have a mosque, you have a Catholic church. They go hand in hand over there. And now you understand why. Who is always the controlling force or the ruling force in the Bible and the Quran? It's always Rome. Rome runs everything. They run England. England runs us. Rome runs America. If you look at an American Express card, who's on the front of it? A Roman soldier. That should tell you something. So you got these Muslims over there killing each other. You got these Muslims and Christians killing each other. These Muslims are fighting against all these different Muslim or Islamic factions. Well, all they got to do is go to the mosque, look next door, and they can see who the hell the enemy is. The same enemy. A little bit of research or a lot of research, you can figure all this stuff out. Now, what Muslims have to accept, what they have to really look into and realize that before Islam existed, there was a worship of Allah. There was the Kaaba. Now, all Allah is, Allah represents the highest God or highest idol of the 360 idols that was worshipped around the Kaaba. Allah would be the highest. Now, before Muhammad was even born, his grandfather was the high priest and keeper of the 360 idols around the Kaaba. Muhammad's father, whose name is Abdullah, his name means slave of Allah. Abda means slave. So before Muhammad was even born, his father and his grandfather worshipped Allah and the Kaaba, and it has nothing to do with Islam. It has everything to do with paganism and the worship of the moon god Al-Elah, who they condensed into Allah. This is fact. This is proof. All the proof is there. All Muhammad did was he came and he got rid of the 360 idols around the Kaaba and said, we're worshiping one God, as your Quran tells you, and that is Allah. So he kept the God the same and changed the form of worship. So while you think you are worshiping this Allah as it pertains to the Quran, you are really worshiping paganism, the pagan God, Allah, disguised as Islam. So you are pagans worshiping a pagan God, pagan moon god by the name of Allah. Why is it that Ramadan corresponds to the moon? Why is it that the logo of Islam has a crescent moon? Because this is the worship of a moon god and a pagan ritualistic religion. That's all it is. Now, what's going on at the Kaaba right now? At the Kaaba, they are walking around the Kaaba in a circle. What is a circle? 360 degrees, representing the 360 idols that was removed from the Kaaba by Muhammad. Okay, so I don't know what else I have to show you other than the things I've shown you in this video. I think you have seen enough to prove to you that this religion is not what you have been told, or to at least spark your brain to go do some more research into the things that you have seen in this video. And I urge you to do just that. Do not take my word for anything. Do not believe any of the people or any of the things you have seen in this video. Go do the research yourself. If you have any doubt in your mind, just go. That's the best way of you figuring this whole thing out. I mean, if you lasted to the end of this video, then something is in your brain, something is in your mind that can see that this is something that's up, something that's not right. And usually when something don't looks right, it's usually not right. Because truth is obvious. Truth is clear as day. Because it's true. It's true. There's not no buts or ifs or ands. Truth is just pure. It doesn't require faith. It doesn't require sacrifice. It simply is. It doesn't require you to pray. It doesn't require you to give money. Truth simply is. And when you see truth, you notice it, because everything else will make sense. If you're looking at something and it don't make sense, it's probably false. It's probably wrong. And you should do some investigating. Sometimes you got to move some bricks. You got to move some dirt to find diamonds, to find gold. And that work that you put in, moving all them bricks and moving all that dirt and getting all dirty, was worth it when you found that gold. So if you got to do some research, and if on your crazy journey into research, you find out that your religion is real, which I'm telling you, it's not, but wouldn't it been worth it to go through all that and then finally get to the gold and be like, wow, all that work was worth it. Look at all this gold. Look at all these diamonds. But if you do all that research and you get all the way down to the bottom and find out that you've been had, there's nothing down there. There's no gold. There's no silver. What do I have? Now, you have the knowledge that this spot is not what you thought it was. You have the knowledge that what somebody told you, that person who told you it was gold down there, that person who told you it was diamonds down there, you have the knowledge of knowing that they are bullshit and not to trust them. So that's what you come out with. You come out with knowledge. You come out with knowledge even though you did not find the religion that you seek or the truth that you seek. Now, I started out this video by showing you how Islam compares to Judaism and Christianity. And we ended up showing you how it compares to paganism. And what you have to realize is, as well as Islam, so is Judaism and Christianity, all comes out of paganism. Now, for those Christians who choose to separate themselves from Catholicism and say, well, I'm a Christian, not a Catholic, they are one and the same. You cannot take out some books from the Bible and just say, well, we're Christian and not Catholics, when Rome gave you your Bible. So Rome is unquestionably pagan. I mean, it's just everywhere. If you know what to look for, you see it all over the place. There's no way to separate the two. It's all over the place. They are more of a Mary worship than a Jesus worship. And all you have to do is to read some of the quotes of the Pope, and they tell you exactly what it is. Now, it's important, and the reason why I'm bringing it up, because you just need to start paying attention to what's been going on. These are all the same religions ran by the same people, and they are tricking you, which is why you'll see pictures. Remember, the Pope, John Paul, meeting with Islamic leaders, kissing the Quran, which is why you see the Pope meeting with Jewish leaders, because they have a Jesuit order of the Catholic Church. It's all the same thing, all the same leaders. So no matter what happens in the end, all this religious war is not being fought by them. It's being fought by you. You're fighting these holy wars. These misleaders, these followers are following the leaders and completing their agenda and giving up their lives so that these people can rule the world. And that's what's going on, which is why you see Obama bowing to the Saudi king. You see him bowing to China. You see the Pope meeting with all kinds of religious figures that are not Christian. Why is this? Especially for Christianity, who completely just throws out any other religion besides Christianity. So when it comes to Christianity, Christianity is not tolerable of Islam and Judaism. It's not. Islam accepts Christianity because we believe that y'all just misled. But Christianity does not accept other religions. They are Protestant. They protest other religions. So why is the Pope then kissing the Quran? Why did the Pope choose to speak with a large Islamic symbol behind him? Trying to tell you something. Why is every major mosque in Saudi Arabia, in Europe, why do they all have a Catholic Church next door. What is going on? Why do Catholics and why do Muslims worship at the same area? They both go and worship, claiming that they are worshiping the remains of Abraham, and they fight for that space. They got two sides, one for Muslims, one for Christians to worship this supposed body. I mean, it's crazy. But this is where this stuff is coming from. These people are all one and the same, all worshiping paganism, disguised as different religions that they are using to control you. As I've been saying for years, and I've been trying to tell you, religion is control. Truth does not require blind faith. Only Allah will require you to completely ignore facts, to completely lose common sense and accept Allah. Only Allah will require that. Truth does not require blind faith. Truth does not require money or a sacrifice. It's just that simple. But the proof is in front of your face. It's up to you to accept it. Either you do or you don't. Your ego is only hurting you, and you can sit there and, say this is all bullshit, or you can do the research yourself. Don't believe nothing I say. Please don't. Do the research yourself. And you'll find out this stuff is true. I mean, it's common sense. As you start digging, if you run into Satan, don't be scared. That's what they want you to run into. Keep digging. It's all a setup, as I've been saying. But I'll leave it to you to do your own research if you don't believe what's in this video. And I want to thank those who have been following me and, sharing my videos and commenting. And I've been debating with so many people on this stuff. So it's fun. Keep debating. Keep with the questions. I always kill them in the debates. And truth is truth. That's all I'm coming with is truth. And I won't show you anything that I can't back up with facts. I'm not just going to come out and say anything. I'm going to show you where I got my proof from. You'll be able to find it, and it will make sense. And that's all I'm trying to do. And this video was not to say I know more than a Muslim or to say that y'all all stupid. It's called the ignorance of the black Muslim, because you are ignorant of this religion. You jumped into it. I don't knock anybody who went to jail and got forced into Islam. I don't knock y'all. Y'all did what y'all had to do to survive. But don't come out speaking that Islamic stuff and you don't know your religion. Do the research. I don't knock y'all. I don't knock any Muslim who don't know his Quran. I can't really knock y'all because it sounds good. They know how to sell it to you well. But you need to research what they are saying to prove it's true. We're from the hood, most of us. We know bullshit when we smell it. We know when something too good to be true. How come when it comes to religion, we can't smell the bullshit? If I was to come to you with any other book, whether it be the Bible or Islam I'm referring to, and I will point out in any other book all of the contradictions in that book, you will immediately say that book is bullshit. But when it comes to a religious book and I show you all the contradictions and problems, nobody wants to refute it. Nobody wants to believe it. They say, oh, well, it's bullshit, and they just accept it. That's called mind control. You have to realize what's been going on. And I want to thank everybody for watching this video. Like, comment, share, all that. Keep with the debates. Keep with the questions. I love it. And for everybody who's really been supporting me on this whole thing, again, special thanks to y'all. Y'all know who you are. Keep watching and keep doing what you do.